are.
At last, we're here. And I'm very happy that you agreed to be our guest speaker, James. I think it was way back in March when I first asked you. Was it
I think so.
at the event at Summer Hall?
Might have been.
Yeah.
I have no idea. I can't remember what happened yesterday. So,
I'm fortunate to have known James for a number of years now. I think it probably came into my consciousness with Start Eden, which was an initiative to attract more software developers and other talent to Edinburgh from London. And so we created a budget so that we could market down there around. Had some interesting signs on the underground, I believe.
yeah, we had some underground advertisement and everything. It was great. It was driven by Edinburgh City Council, Skyscanner, FanDuel was involved. We had a small group of companies that all had a similar pain and tried to band together a little bit to get more awareness around Edinburgh and the startup scene. But it's a big, tough challenge, that one. So.
And I do believe the software developer industry in Edinburgh is quite incestuous.
Can be, yeah.
So software developers go from one company to another, and it is hard to attract the best talent because the money in London is so much higher. And you were also working on something called MyCard then. And I think I first come across MyCard at Edinburgh University e-club event, and that's when
Yeah, so we started as MyCard. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of MyCard, so no. There you go. That's how old we are as a startup, right? So that was about 9 years ago. We started as a B2C product, a consumer product, essentially a digital passport that you could use, travel in the internet, validated by your bank account and your identity and data you have with your bank. And then about 4 years ago-ish, realized we were still too early for the market. So one of the lessons there for me is that timing's everything in a startup. You might think there's a market there and all the rest of it, but as you say, unless you've got that real validation and start to get that scale, not just the validation, it's great for a customer to pay you, but until you get that scale and start to see those metrics, the SaaS metrics or whatever start to build up, then you should always question it. And we got that wrong. So we were, I think even today, probably two years too early. But about 4 years ago, we pivoted to a B2B platform. So we essentially solve the same pain, but through a different channel.
And very often when you're too early with an idea, you end up having to educate people. Do you think entrepreneurs should be in the education business?
Avoid it if you can. Well, because you're one person, right? With limited resources. The trick is to look at those graphs and look at the market adoption of things and try to be a late first mover or early second mover or something and try and catch that wave. But it's really difficult. And it's something you see in academia quite a bit. I don't know if anyone's got an academic background or whatever, right? But it's a challenge when you think, everyone here is thinking about solving a problem. It's a challenge for me. I've thought about solving problems my whole life. And for this is 9 years of thinking, 10, 11 years of thinking about solving this problem. You start to think about it so much that your thought processes move beyond the market, if that makes sense. If you spent your whole life thinking how to make the best bottle, you would design something utopian almost. Even if that wasn't going to be relevant for 50 years, that's what you think needs to exist. Trying to fit that with the market today can be a real challenge. So we suffered from that quite a bit. But try not to educate, absolutely. Yeah.
So I definitely think that's, I'm in a similar position trying to take a process that was, established in Silicon Valley and get it going in Edinburgh is kind of hard because we are unfortunately behind the curve in a number of areas. But so if you have this, if you see this thing, if you see this problem and you know what the solution is, you can't let it go, can you? You have to, even if you're early.
That's the sickness, right?
The curse.
The curse, yeah.
And is that what separates us from normal people?
I don't know, yeah, maybe. Well, it's an interesting thing, right? Because you have to, a lot of your stuff up there was about passion and interest. And, I think one of the things that probably as an industry we don't talk about as being a CEO or founder is probably one of the loneliest and hardest jobs that you'll ever take on, right? Who else do you have to talk to get support and all the rest of it? That's why co-founders can be such a powerful thing, to rely on somebody else in this very lonely, long journey, And it's a long journey because it's going to take you 10 years. again, frustration for me is everyone who thinks about it being a 3 or 4 or 5 year plan. VCs are really bad for that. It's instilling traditionally that sort of 5-year exit type thing is bullshit, right? It's a 10-year plan. FanDuel, 10 years. Skyscanner, 12 years. Show me a proposition that wasn't 10 years in the making to get that critical mass, right? So it is a long journey. It's going to take a huge amount of effort. And I think there is something within people that just, I don't know, makes them comfortable with the risk or gives them, you know, they've got enough motivation to keep going through that time. But it's hugely difficult, absolutely.
Yeah. And I remember I was at an event, it was at, I think it was the Scott Edge, and one of the founders from, not Float, Ollie.
Free agent.
Free agent, yeah. Who used to fly Harriers. He was a Harrier jump jet. I asked him, what is the number one characteristic you need to have as an entrepreneur? And he said the ability to take risks. And obviously he was an RAF pilot and had quite a high risk threshold. And I think there's a number of us in the room who have that because we are doing something that is the chances of success are low. It's extra, it's really, really hard work. People don't necessarily give you the answers that you want to have, and then you might run out of money or have other problems. And of course, one of the problems that we do need to guard against is neglecting our family or
friends, health, social lives. Everything.
It's quite a good social life, actually.
Well, no, it could be. I'm not selling it, am I? No.
We need to find some nugget there.
No, but it's great though. You get to solve a problem. You get to change the world, right? That's the thing that I think is inside a lot of people that kind of gets. I've only ever done startups, by the way. I think I've had a real job maybe 6 months of my life, so this is my 6th or 7th startup. For me, this is just what I like doing, so this is what I do. But I think that's a big part of it. You just have to embrace it and love it, embrace the risk, jump on the train, and off you go.
Would you say that you're unemployable now?
I don't think I ever was unemployable. I don't know. Well, I guess it depends on what someone's looking to employ somebody for.
Yeah.
Big part of it. I'm sure I could sell that somewhere to somebody.
Yeah, it's a hard job to find for your perfect fit.
Yeah. But a lot of people have become very generalists, right? So I've got a great team. They do all the hard work. I just try and point ourselves in a direction that kind of makes sense. But I guess the employability is a tough one because the longer you do it, the more generalist you become and the less domain knowledge or specific skills you have.
Yeah. So when you had this vision in the past, was it hard for you to keep your team, keeping pace with you and seeing it as clearly as you did? Was that a challenge or was that
Absolutely.
easy?
Yeah, no, especially as the team gets bigger because you get these thresholds too. I don't know who's worked with big teams or led big teams, but 5 people is relatively easy. 15, 20 becomes a little bit more difficult. 25, you don't know anybody as much as you used to. You don't get a chance to go for coffee and the chit chat and keep the message going. So I think the bigger you get, the harder it is, absolutely. Yeah. Especially when you are thinking about things so much, you're so busy, you're so insular, finding those opportunities and that rhythm to communicate to everybody and keep that shared vision going is a huge challenge without distracting everybody, because they've got jobs to do and stuff as well. So it's for us, it's been a real challenge over the years, especially as we've gone through cycles. I think the average startup has 3 near-death experiences is one of the sort of stats. So, be prepared for it. That's where the risk comes in, right? But every time you have those near-death experiences, a lot of times you can pare down. We've gone all the way down to 3 people and then back up. I'll give you a sense of rhythm. 2 weeks after we got our first seed funding, we had 11 people in the office. So we had them all lined up, got our seed funding. 2 weeks later, had a room full of people. 2 years later, we were up to like 30 or something. A couple of years later, down to 3. We're back up to 33, 34 people now. I think that's part of the sort of cycles and where some of the risk comes from. But even that in itself is a big challenge because every time you get a new team or a new group of people, you have to start from scratch, especially in an industry where you're still doing that thought leadership, because there is no evidence in what you do has any interest to anybody. So you're trying to bring people onto a fairly conceptual vision at that point, and that can be challenging too.
I think one of the things you seem to be very successful at is raising capital for your businesses, mm-hmm. and that has obviously enabled you to hire the teams and everything else. So is it easy for you?
I think it's luck.
All right, okay.
Yeah. Well, it's the right place at the right time, isn't it? I don't know how else to describe that but luck. But we've been very fortunate, I think. We've been able to find the money when we need to at every cycle and step of the way. Raising money is hugely difficult. I don't know how many people are raising money right now, but depending on the type of money you're raising, the amounts where you're raising, it can be a big challenge, right? I think we raised about £10 million so far, £10.5 million. So I think we've just been really fortunate with that. But it's selling, right? You have to sell a vision, the belief that you're the right person to do that job, that you've got the team behind you, there's a market. For me, it's just sales. I don't think there's anything but that. And being sales is just a numbers game, right?
Yeah. So I was just going to ask you, how do you create your luck?
I think it's a little bit of the who, right? So how do you create luck in that sort of space or in selling? I'm a very iterative person. I think that's maybe a component, always trying to, I have a really bad habit of every time I come out of a meeting, my first question is, what can we do better? What was different? What can I do better? What resonated? What didn't? To the point of slight OCD, but I think that's sort of continuing to learn and stuff is really important, and catering your message towards who you're talking to. That you talked about practice, absolutely. I hate public speaking. I don't think I'm very good at it, but a good friend of mine, Mike Siegel, who runs 500 startups in the States right now. Great guy, took me aside like 10 years ago and said, it's the 10,000 hour rule, right? You just have to spend 10,000 hours doing it and you'll be great. So there's a little bit of that. And then it's just the numbers game. You know, you just have to meet as many people as you can and pitch as often as you can and keep the energy up as long as you can until you find that one or two people that is willing to support you.
So the 10,000 hours thing is a reference to Malcolm Gladwell book Outliers. And the people who create something new are the ones who have 10,000 hours of critical experience in that industry. So for instance, the Beatles, they had 10,000 hours of playing gigs before they became famous. And Bill Gates, he had 10,000 hours of writing code and software development before he started the business. He used to sneak into the labs at night so he could, practice on this newfangled gadget. And I think, so the idea is that you need to have, there is a hierarchy of talent. And, I probably have 10,000 hours of talking to people and listening and through so I used to coach outward bands, and then I used to coach motocross, and I used to coach business. And so I think my 10,000s are in there and making connections and helping people to see the way forward.
But it's almost a lifetime. I mean, that's the point, really, for me, is that you have to dedicate enough time. It's the 10 years is the journey that
40 hours a week, 10 years for 10 years,
40, 80, come on. What are you talking about? 120, that's what we want. No.
I was up till 1 o'clock this morning, working before I gave up on my keyboard. I must, sad to say, I had some catching up to do. Yes, so there is a price to pay in being a successful entrepreneur. It's not it's not for everybody, and this is one of the things that we really need to face up to, the fact that there is for anything that's worthwhile, there's a price to pay. Nothing ever comes cheap, and we don't want the price to be our families or our health or any of those things. Hopefully, the price will be of somebody else's money. But
it's the top 5%, isn't it? It's the chances of success are pretty low. I worked as a chef when I was growing up a little bit, and I connect with that sort of restaurant industry to be a Michelin star restaurant, right? Those that like to eat. That's a very small part of the restaurant industry. It's almost a fraction, and I think it's the same in startups, right? There's thousands of startups in the UK, tens of thousands in the UK. Every year there's tens of thousands. That's who we're fighting with as a startup, is we compete and I say this quite a bit internally, we're competing with other startups just as much as any competitors or anything else for funding, for awareness, for talent, for all those things. And that's a huge challenge in itself. The restaurant industry for me is a lot like that. If you want a good podcast to listen to, as a sort of parallel, David Chang, who's a Korean-American chef in the States, absolutely brilliant podcast where he talks a lot about team and dynamics and motivating people and communication and all the rest of it. Because in that environment, it's very similar. You know, people come in, high intensity, have a focus, a goal, trying to deliver the best of something, scaling that, multiple locations, all the rest of it. It's really helpful.
Yeah, it's just a different type of entrepreneurship, really, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they got knives.
Knives, yes, and hot oil and all sorts of other scary things. So you create your own luck just through your work ethic and just really putting the hours in, and you said it. You touched on the fact that it's all about the who. So is there anybody who has stepped in and made a difference over the years?
Everybody. I mean, so many people. I don't know if there's any one. We've had fantastic chairmen. I'm a sole, just in this project, I'm a sole founder, or whatever you want to call it, single founder. Sounds like a single dad. Single founder. So I've not had a co-founder to rely on. I've always had to rely on board and investors, which have been fantastic over the years. And really supportive. We've been able to connect with them, and they've been fantastic along the way. But also team and community. It's, you know, getting involved in the community is a big part of it, as big as anything else. You never know, as you say, who you meet. I don't know if it'd be fair to pick out any one person, but just creating enough people around you. And a team as well, you know. It's my job's to make myself as redundant as quickly as possible if I can, right? So we're not going to scale if I have anything involvement in things. Really, I can only point the direction and let the team we've got, which is fantastic, plow on. So
you have the experience of both worlds in that you've had co-founders and you've come together to do something, and then you have the experience of you know, you're taking control yourself and building an external team. What are the strengths and weaknesses of both of those approaches?
There's good and bad on both sides. For me, when I've had co-founders for projects, I think making sure that you're on the same page, pulling the same weight, believing in the same thing is critical. I mean, you get someone to bounce ideas off of and stuff. I don't know how many co-founders are here, how many people, right? I mean, that's good. To have somebody that you can talk to is fantastic. Sometimes having someone to talk to isn't so good as well, right? So, you know, I think being a single, it's easier just to move forward more quickly. You just make more mistakes. So it's probably fail quicker. Is that cycle versus somewhere where you can make more concerted steps? I wish I had a co-founder. I do, absolutely. I've just not been able to find one for this. We've gotten a leadership team and an exec team and a board that kind of act as that nowadays, but it's pretty lonely without one. I think it's easier overall to have one, definitely. And the chances of success, if you look at the stats, are always higher when you do have one.
But it is hard to find a good, you know, the right co-founder, and I know a number of people who struggled with that and are trying to go down the sole founder route.
Especially if it's not a mutual idea, right? If it's a co-founder where you're bringing someone into your idea, that's much more difficult. If you're both sitting in the pub one day and thought, actually, let's do this, or you've worked together, there's some sort of social or work connection, I think it's a lot easier because you're on the same page from the beginning. I think that's part of the challenge is, you know, there's sites, there's services, there's networking things where people go out and they find that, you know, maybe they're from a commercial perspective and they want that technical co-founder and they bring them in, but it's not their baby. I think that's the challenge there. If it's not your baby, then are you really going to invest the same effort and time and energy, even if you think it's a good idea? I've been in that situation where I've been one of the founders of something, but it's not been my baby. It's really hard to motivate myself at the level I need to if I think it's a good idea, but it's just an idea. You know, it doesn't. I think these things have to connect with you. If that makes sense, I don't know. Yeah.
You obviously, if you're the visionary lead founder and you're putting most of the hours in and you're, you know, committing most of the sweat and the suffering and the pain and everything else, then you wouldn't have a three-way split. It would be, you would have a majority, and then you would divvy out the rest depending on other people's situations and abilities.
Yeah.
But of course we're in a situation where people that we brought on dropped off, but it was okay because we were using vesting, and so we still have some equity left and to give or to use to motivate another. And we're actually working with a full stack software developer at the moment who's hopefully will join our team, and we're signing the shareholders agreement in a month or so, maybe in the new year. And he actually approached me through Co-Founders Lab.
Yeah.
I put my profile on Co-Founders Lab about 3 years ago. Never heard anything, and then I get this email out of the blue, just when the perfect timing actually. So I'll definitely recommend everyone check it.
Well, and I guess that's part of it as well, is what co-founder are you looking for, right? Because actually, in a lot of ways, your whole team can be your co-founder. There's no reason why. I mean, that's the way I view it. We're all in it together. We all need to get something out of it. I want everyone to be successful because everyone's got to work hard to do it, right? It's just slightly different levels and structures and all the rest of it. But there's a lot of different options there.
Yeah. So we'll open up for questions in a moment. So if you can be thinking about what kind of question you'd like to ask. But before we go there though, so I'd just like to touch on the learning and iteration experiences that you've gone through in the various businesses. Have you been a bit like Doctor Who, in that you've died and you've come back as a new person, or has it just been a bit more subtle than that?
I think there's probably been a couple cases where, there's probably been more reinventive than anything. Depends on how far you fail or how fast you fall or something, whatever that thing is. I don't know. I guess, like I said, I mean, for me, I love this agile, iterative world, and iterations for me, that sort of learning is part of the challenge. I'm really rubbish at what I do, but only because I think I can be a lot better and improve and do things differently and all the rest of it. So on a personal level, my cycle ends up being very rapid and short. And so I don't really notice it as much. I'd have to probably go back and look at a video of me or something like that, or get someone to tell me what I was like 10 years ago or 5 years ago or a year ago. But for me, that's the only way I can survive in this world, is to try and close those cycles as quick as possible.
Yeah.
In anything, in fundraising and selling and whatever, just to keep that sort of just-in-time mentality going, knowing enough to be dangerous and ask the right questions, and failing quickly enough not to kill yourself and your business and everything else, and learn and iterate quickly enough to be slightly better than the next person,
So this is one of the reasons why entrepreneurs shouldn't do stuff in stealth mode, because it's important to get something out there and test the market.
Absolutely.
And we're hopefully familiar with the build, measure, learn loop that Eric Ries popularised. And I like to think about how fast I like to ride my motorbike, and very often I'm revving it, looking at the revs, approaching the red zone, and slow down a bit. But I know entrepreneurs who've never completed a cycle once, they're just kind of like, bills. They never measure or learn. They just keep building.
And the measurements is a really critical part of that.
Yeah.
I don't think we, like the first couple of years for me as a startup are the golden years, especially if you've raised a little bit of money, because there's no expectation. You don't have to prove anything. You're just building something. And that excitement of building something is great. It's fantastic. I love that sort of phase myself. I mean, building things is brilliant. Proving it, selling it, measuring it, replicating it, scaling it, those are the things that are the challenge. But that's where the success comes from. That's why you need that loop.
Yeah. And that's the scary part, where you actually put something out there in the public domain and face rejection and people telling you...
Is anyone here in stealth mode? This is a personal bugbear of mine.
Can you elaborate on stealth mode?
Are you out there talking about what you do to anybody that'll listen? Or are you keeping it close to your chest?
I'll just process that.
You mean the idea?
Yeah.
You think you've got some new invention, and do you keep it closer? Do you? Yeah, it's an interesting...
Right? Because I think there's definitely a sort of British perspective that doesn't exist in North America. I'm Canadian, so I can maybe relate to it a little bit, but there's definitely a sort of British perspective over here where people they think they have a great idea, they're going to come up with a new bottle for something. It's fantastic, it's going to change the world, it's going to be the best bottle in the whole world. I can't tell anybody about it. I have to keep it, someone might steal my idea. The reality is, that's rubbish, right? You're either going to succeed, you're going to do it quicker, better, easier, faster than anybody else and win, or you're not going to be that person. And keeping it to yourself in terms of finding the who and getting the feedback and that sort of cycle of learning and conceptualizing something just completely breaks down. You know, even asking, like, anytime a VC asks you, do you want to sign an NDA, say no, because it doesn't matter. A, they're not worth the paper they're written on, but B, they're going to tell everybody they know anyways, because they're going to go out and validate the idea. They're either going to believe you're the person that's going to deliver on that vision and be successful, or you're not. Keeping it close to your chest doesn't help you at all. I think over here, too often we do that. You know, we think we're going to change the world in some way and don't get out and get that feedback.
What do you think about executive summaries? How widely should we distribute them or make them available?
Go for it. And you shouldn't have anything in there that you're not comfortable sharing anyways. If you've got actual IP, then don't put it in it. You don't have to describe how you're, especially in exec summary, you don't have to describe how you're doing it necessarily, but what the impact is and what the benefits are. I mean, that's what people are more interested typically anyways. But any of this, decks, anything else, I think as soon as you have that confidence that you know what it is that you're trying to do, you have to get out and do it as quickly and as rapidly as you can.
Yeah. Well, I think you've answered a number of questions, the conversations I've been having with people recently. We're doing a visa entrepreneurship endorsement thing right now, and I was asked to create a list of the companies that we've helped over the years. And so I was thinking about, these companies, and actually, and it was a really thought-provoking exercise for us, and it was far smaller than I actually thought it would be. And I guess what I want to say to people is that, you need to incorporate, you need to just go for it more rather than thinking small. And this is why we run these events, to help you to do that, because I'd love to put your company on our website and to talk about you and say this is a company that's going to change the world. I think we kind of started touching on opening up to questions there, so I'd like to actually continue with that. Hopefully somebody will have a question that they'd like to ask James. Okay, great.
Sure. You were talking about having a small team, 2, 3, 4, 5 people, that's quite easy to kind of create like a good culture. And then you said, obviously, it's more difficult when you've got teams of 25, 30. What recommendations have you got to kind of try and maintain culture? Because I've seen kind of culture kind of break down as well. But, as teams increase, people are getting much less engaged. I'm not quite sure. But.
Yeah, lots of ways to answer that. I think there's a certain angle there that's, culture's got to come from within. Most of the articles that you read about culture is all about embedding that in the team and the company and creating that sort of culture within and living and breathing some of those values. That in itself is challenging, because how do you translate your values to someone else's values? How do you create that common language? How do you reinforce that? I don't know if there is a right or wrong answer. I think it's just a journey that you maintain as any startup or any company that grows. You have to start somewhere and just flog the horse as, you just keep pounding the message.
Do you stand up in front of, the whole team on a regular basis and talk about what the vision is and talk about how you're going to get there, or who's going to get us there?
Yeah, so communication, I think, is the key to it. And we run sort of a weekly cycle. So Mondays we tend to have a lot of internal meetings, and Friday at 4 o'clock we have what we call beer o'clock. Our first purchase as a company was a beer fridge. And we're proud of that. Exactly. Except it was one of those ones out of one of the wine shops, so it was a huge beer fridge with 1 keg of beer in it. But I think that communication cycle and layering that communication and constantly reiterating is critical. So we've got 4 company values. On a weekly basis, we come back to those and do an MVP at the end of the week. That's always related to the culture and the values that we have. We do a sort of a team update at the end of the week. We have a beer afterwards. Part of that for me is to get everyone to brain dump at the end of the week so that they don't have to remember things for Monday. Because I think it's much better to kind of go, you know, James, we got that done, and Joe, we got that done, and that's over here, and this is where we got here, so that people can kind of just detox for the weekend, so to speak. On a monthly basis, we have MVPs that again all relate to culture. We have some branding.
What are they, MVPs?
Most valuable players.
Oh, right.
So every month we identify somebody who's done something that underpins the values, brings special recognition to that, and we build all the way up to a quarterly meeting where absolutely, I've learned my lesson over the years is every quarter I re-pitch to the business, right? And every quarter we cover the company values, or we focus in on a value more these days. We cover the company goals for the year. Assumption's the devil's work, right? And if you assume that people actually understand it, you're wrong. You have to do everything you can to just make sure there is no confusion. And even that point, you know, what is your pitch? How do you get everybody in the company to pitch what you do? That's the goal, right? If you can do that and everybody knows what the values are, then a lot of the other things click into place. People can become more self-organizing as teams, depending on your, I guess, structure, whether you like squads and sort of self-organizing teams or not. But I think if you can achieve that, if everybody in the business can tell you what the values are and everybody can pitch your idea, that's where you want to get to. And communication's the only way, you know.
So
Hammering.
not everybody can do that. Is that what you've just talked about? This whole process of, you know, bringing the team together and motivating them, and I think you need to have a really high emotional quotient to be able to do that. And not everybody, you know, not everybody can do that. And where do you learn to do that? Is it something?
10,000 hour rule, isn't it? And you just keep doing it.
Okay.
No, but I mean, yeah, everyone's got challenges. We're all good at things and shit at other things. You just have to keep practicing the stuff you're shit at, right? So, yeah, I mean, what does it take to get up? If you're out there, if you're a founder and you're pitching your idea, just pitch your idea. Actually, if you're an early stage company, why not? I don't know, I'm shooting from the hip here a little bit. Why not practice on the team? Why not pitch the idea to the team every week as part of a catch-up? A, it helps you pitch, and B, it helps them understand. As you refine it, you keep them on the journey that you're on, right?
I might try that.
Yeah, right. Well, it's hard. I mean, nobody wants that criticism and that sort of, I hate role playing and that sort of thing myself as well. I mean, nobody, I think really, only a small part of the population like that sort of thing. And they're usually in sales, but yeah, I mean, that sort of thing. But you got to learn, you got to find out what works for you and your team and the personalities and everything else, and how much communication. Because if you over communicate, people complain about too many meetings, and yes, I know that, and they sort of disconnect. So it's trying to find those, always questioning and understanding, and trying to find that gap in the team.
Yes, 2 points. The first one is, I think you should give yourself a little bit more credit when it comes to public speaking than you give. You're fine. The second one is about your talk about this iterative nature. I think this is a really hardcore skill or a personality trait an entrepreneur needs to have. If you can't reiterate or rediscover things, there's no progress there. And there's a book, I don't know if you know about Jeffrey Moore, he talks about chasm, and 95% companies fail because they ride the wave where there's an excitement and you build something new and there are people who are going to believe in you as well, and then it dies off because the masses don't care. They simply don't give a shit.
Yeah.
Right? So 5% of the companies, then they pivot around and make their business for those masses, and then they succeed as well. And you did that with your initial business where you were working with B2C and then you pivoted to B2B. I want to hear a bit more about this pivoting, and how long did it take you to realize, first of all, that the pivot is extremely important, and does it also mean that when you have the scale to your business and the time is right, would you actually turn back to B2C as well then?
So I think B2C might have a role for us to play, or a role for us, whatever, in the future at some point. But we're still a couple of years too early. People, and trying to listen to other people talk about the pain we were trying to solve, I don't think it's kind of connected yet with the market. But I mean, I guess the short answer is too long. It always takes too long, doesn't it? A minute longer is too long than it should have taken. And it was difficult. So it's interesting. A lot of times we look at, I guess there's a few sort of warnings as being in this game, the startup game. First thing, everyone will always tell you the good things and no one tells you the bad things. So how do you find out the bad things is a big challenge. You ask the right questions to find out what somebody really thinks or whether it's working. And how do you keep doing that to get to that critical mass, that 20% usage of the market or whatever it is, you know, so that you can start to replicate it. We had a bit of that challenge, you know. And my card is a B2C proposition. At one point we had probably as many customers that we have today, a fraction of the revenue, but still people signing up, use cases, excitement. But we found that we just weren't scaling past those small startups who are willing to use us into, because it was a B2C to B or B2B to C sort of model, into getting any big companies and starting to get that scale. So we were able to get funding, we were able to get the initial use cases, everything looked good. Compound monthly growth, which is a great sort of indicator of usage, you know, was 20% for 12 months or so. Everyone was happy. We were like, and then trying to get that next 20% become harder. Those bigger deals became harder. That how do you get 10 customers, not 2 customers, became harder. And actually we went through a couple cycles. So I was talking earlier, we powered most of the Bitcoin community at one point. That was great. Market collapsed. We took a step back. Okay, if that's not the market, what market do we go after? It was payments. In 2 weeks, we signed 5 deals, 2 big international payments company, money transfer companies. That was great, that was fantastic. We're on the right track. One shelved the project, the other one, it's enterprise sales, right? So he moved jobs, everything fell off, went back to reset. And we went through that cycle 2 or 3 times. So that's why I say it was too long. Could we have changed it? I think we would have ended up in the same place. But it was just that realization that we weren't, I guess, scaling at the same level that we needed to. You know, we had some initial validation, but we weren't able to really scale that proposition. And then took a step back and thought, well, how do we address this? What are people selling? These are questions we probably should have asked a lot earlier, not being blinded by the excitement. You know, are people buying us in the right way? Are we selling in the right way? Are we getting the right type of customer? Can we scale those customers, the right size of customers that we need to scale? So not the small companies, but how do you get more of the big companies? And just kind of really question that. In the end, we took a step back and thought, okay, well, you know, one side we've got this consumer identity product. The idea at the time of consumers owning their data was still foreign to most of the market, right? Now we have GDPR. We live in a different world. You know, I own my data. Everyone accepts that I own my data. At that time, nobody agreed. And I'd get laughed out of rooms quite often. On the other side, we had this bank verification, this bank identity thing. Again, could you rely on a bank as a source of trust, da, 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 da. All of that was too complex. Put the two together, and the realization was the conversation was just too risky for those big enterprises. It was too much of a conversation. We would have to talk to too much of the business to bring them on board to do anything, that it became an impossible task. So going B2B, selling ourselves in a way that those businesses are more used to buying us, adapting to the market, I guess, in some ways, meant that we were able to sell something that they were more used to buying, even though we were solving the same pain, which was around identity and verification and data and stuff like that. How we ended up doing it was not a wholesale pivot. We ended up ripping the two apart, setting up another product, running that initially to get some validation, and then when that started to scale, we shut down the other one. So we did sort of because we already had some traction, it was more of a graceful pivot, I guess, in some ways, or more of a transition. But yeah, never early enough. I don't know, does that answer your question?
That's fine. Thanks for the explanation. Just one.
No, I know what you're like. Maybe later. Does anybody have a question at the back there?
Can you just tell me what your core values are?
Yep, we're a clan, which is all about us being a team. It's the way we describe being a team. We've got one shared vision, which means we're all traveling north. We all know where we want to get to. Brave at heart, which for me is, and for a lot of the team, is around communication, right? About that open, honest, candid conversation. Sometimes that's a big thing, you know, how do you give colleagues feedback? So we built a value around that. And now I've blanked on the fourth one. Damn it. Shared vision for the customer. Sorry, took me a second. So as a B2B proposition, is, you know, our success is irrelevant. If we can't make our customers successful, they're not going to keep using us and growing with us and scaling with us. So, and it's interesting, you know, around values. We've essentially had similar values for a long time. Earlier this year, actually, it was the team that got together and reinvented the values. They tried, you know, the task was come up with a language that makes sense to you in these 4 areas, or maybe there's 3 areas, maybe there's 5, I don't know, but, you know, it's got to come from within. So you guys come up with a language and the branding around that. They did. It's great. They're better than what we had before. We've iterated and learned and improved them, and now it's all about just that communication and living and breathing them.
I like the fact that they're just 3 words. You know, that's what you need. Anything where you have to remember a sentence, no one's going to remember.
No.
How do you then put it into practice?
Yeah, and you know, I think early stage, you know, as you're recruiting people and you're looking for funding, value should be part of your proposition, or can be, depending on them, could be part of your proposition. There's I'm trying to remember the name, there's a company in town that does AML for lawyers and stuff called, Amicus. There you go. They've got a great set of values. I think they've got 4 as well. But again, theirs are more about their product and their proposition and what they want to achieve with it. But they use it in part of their pitches. I've seen them pitch and present themselves, and it's always part of, here's who we are, here's how we want to help you. I think it can be pretty powerful.
Okay, Joe.
Can I just follow up on that? Like, this is happening with one of my entrepreneurs at the moment. So I work with group entrepreneurs, and we were talking about the merit of them getting the team together to do that values session, and what happens if that starts to diverge from the entrepreneur's vision. And it's hard to manage, like, how do you actually do that? Because the worst outcome there for me is to say, hey guys, you're empowered to do this, but you better say what's in my head. You know?
Yeah.
Like, how did you manage to, did you just think, well, we're just going to go with that?
So
Did you have that in your mind?
I think if you've got the vision agreed of what you want to achieve, then it's irrelevant, because that's just how you achieve it, right? If you don't have that vision and that's not clear, then actually the values could create something that isn't that. So you have to do that first. And that's what we had. I mean, we knew what we want to achieve. We've got a common pitch statement. We know the value proposition. We know, you know, everyone can describe it in very similar ways. If I'm ever out for a drink with somebody and someone says what you do and I'm with a developer, I always get them to say it because I think it's funny. But 9 times out of 10, they're able to. You know, they're able to find a way of describing it. And that's brilliant. So I think if you have a vision, then you have to lose control a bit, and that culture has to come from within. And we just had people pitch it back. You know, we had a little culture team get pulled together, different people across the business. They came up with these company values and a way of describing it and talking about it. Their approach was fantastic. I mean, much better than I would have done. Actually, you know, I would have shortcut the process. I wouldn't have given it the time. I would have gone, what do I want? Well, I want A, B, and C. That's what we're doing, right? We'll create some words around it. But actually, that bottom-up approach contextualized it. It validated it. And, you know, they went through the business, proving it with other people, getting the feedback because they wanted everybody else involved. Actually, that created more traction than I or an exec team or a leadership team could ever have created. So just let them get on with it.
I like that. If you think about the word inspire, and as a leader of organization, as a CEO, it's our job to inspire people. And if you actually think what that word means, it means to breathe life into something. Yeah, it's the opposite of expire when you breathe out. So and if you breathe life into your team, breathe life into the vision, breathe life into the idea, hopefully there's, you know, you breathe life into the right people, and they'll you know, be energized and want to help you to achieve it. Okay, Cecile.
You say that you have run several startups, so my questions would be, did you run them, how do you find these ideas, like several ideas, and did did you run them simultaneously or one after the other? How did you manage that?
I don't think you can do more than one at a time. I think it would kill any human being. So I think it's really difficult. I mean, you can explore a couple ideas at the same time. For me, it's all problem solving. I like solving problems. I like building things. I like creating things. I like the challenge of changing things. You know, that's part of what, at a personal level, kind of gets me up in the morning. And I guess it's just been iterative through that. You know, you finish one thing, you give up on it, you change, you sell, you do something, and then immediately you start thinking about what to do next and all the rest of it. So I don't think there's been any consistency in that journey. I mean, we pulled a IP out of Heriot-Watt University years ago, knowledge measurement assessment, so testing, online testing essentially. That was completely different than building hardware for home media center systems, which was different than what we do today, you know. I don't know, it just comes along. I don't think necessarily I have always spent enough time questioning and understanding it. I think I've been too reactive over the years and, hey, there's a new challenge, let's go for it, and not really had a quiet walk and talk with myself maybe as much as I should have, but it's part of the journey.
Margaret?
You talked about making revenue, so I'm just curious what sort of revenue that the company is making. And also when you were talking about scaling the business, you know, you talked about the pivot and the scaling. What metrics did you have in your head, i.e. what would be a successful scale for you?
So I think that depends on the type of business quite a bit. We're a loose SaaS model, so we tend to use a lot of the standard SaaS metrics around average customer value, LTV, compound monthly or annual growth rates, churn rates, ratio of churn rates, revenue. I mean, if you Google SaaS metrics, there's some great sites that'll just list them all for you and give you some industry benchmarks around what that should be in T numbers or whatever they're called as kind of compound factors go. For retail or something, I mean, it can be different. I don't think it matters what it is. You just have to measure it consistently and grow with it, you know, understand and use those things. Because it's easy to get excited about something, right? It's easy to blind yourself from what is or isn't really happening, and numbers don't lie. So it's measure everything. And I mean, as a business, we measure, especially in our sales and marketing funnels, we measure everything right from the beginning all the way to the end. Do that as early as possible and use those numbers to really understand where you can adjust something, where something is going down when other things are going up, where you can kind of take a step back, look at the engine and everything that's, you know, it's telling you, and try and pick it apart and problem solve. You know, what are the next sort of things that are solving.
And what's your revenue just now?
We're probably, good direct question. Yeah, well, we're probably, I know exactly what it is, but put us in the $1 million to $2 million mark right now. So we're in that sort of stage. Not enough, that's what it is. Yeah. But we're getting there, yeah. So we've got 35 companies on the platform, over 5 countries, 45,000 people a month use our platform. So, you know, we've got enough volume there. Now our challenge, actually in that sort of early growth phase, is still a measurement challenge. It's making sure that we're focusing on the right things, because, you know, when we first had the first 10 people go through the platform, you'd look at every one of them, right? Was it successful? Wasn't it? Did they convert? Was there a data quality issue? You know, you pick it apart. When you get a couple hundred a day, it's really hard to do that. When you get a couple thousand a day, you ignore it. And that's the wrong thing to do, because, you know, the problems can start anywhere.
You don't know what if you implement a change or release, you don't know what impact it's had, because the cohorts that are coming on are...
We're always one step away from disaster, right? I mean, any startup, you can be WeWork and end up one step away from disaster. I didn't say that, by the way.
we all know.
I mean, but that's the point, right? I mean, how many big startups fail, right? Lots of them. Not as many as small startups, and they tend to fail bigger. But, you know, FanDuel's a really good example. FanDuel's had huge challenges over the years, just from a regulatory point of view, right? And still challenges today, I think, in the US to a great degree. That whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and you just got to keep keep going that cycle.
Okay, maybe one more question, and then we're going to move. Kevin.
Just wondering how you felt when you changed from that B2C to B2B model. Did you feel you sold out? Because presumably your original vision was to help the consumer right at the start.
No. Simple answer. It is a hell of a lot easier to sell a B2B proposition than a B2C. I don't know if anyone's thinking about B2C. B2C is the hardest end of the market by 100,000 times, right? So to get that mass traction momentum, it's the most exciting because we all can use it. It's the thing that we hear about in the news and stuff so much more, but it's definitely the harder side of it. I think if we can, for us, it wasn't really a matter of pivoting from, you know, I don't know, plastic chairs to cars or something else. You know, it wasn't a wholesale pivot. It was a change of channel. So it was still the same value proposition. We were still solving the same pain, but just in a different way. And seeing that traction, that momentum, that connection with the market was enough to not worry about it. If we get back to that point at some point, get back to that B2C play at some point, absolutely. But I know it's not now, and it's not next year or the year after. Actually, what we're getting traction from is the B2B. And everything that we do, everybody in this room, I mean, it's all about making money, right? As much as we want to change the world and solve a problem, if we can't make money, we won't get funding. If we can't make money, we can't pay people. Actually, having a proposition that's making money is well worth it, or rewarding enough to go, okay, we've made the right decision.
Okay, well, thank you, Jane, for all the incredible insights.
Okay.
Appreciate it very much.